Hello, friends. It is MG, the Reimagine Strategist, and I just want to welcome you all to a new edition of the Reimagine Your Life Podcast. And as always, I just want to thank you guys for listen. We hit some super milestones on this last week. Listen, I have to tell y'all, thank you guys so much. I just got the tag up that said that we had hit 16,000 views. I was like, what? So thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're about to celebrate our 1 year anniversary. And I am like, oh my God, you guys are absolutely amazing. So thank you so much. And as per usual, y'all know how I do this each time. Make sure that you share. It's going to be somebody amazing in the lab, right? Like this gal, Chante Dent. Oh my God. I'm about to introduce her, but before I do, make sure that if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. We have hit 10,000 subscribers, guys, on IG, 6,600 out there on YouTube. I was like, what? Oh my God. You guys are just, y'all doing it. Like, the numbers is just unreal. But being that brainy girl that I am, like the numbers like always just make me just say, okay, digital, this is my creep space. Like, I just love it. So thank you guys so much. The stats are amazing. But share it with a friend, a family, a colleague, or a coworker. I would love for you guys to let them know that we are doing these things, talking about change, because what? Change is just a choice. So, all right, so you guys know I had to get all the dirty details out of the way. So, all right, now I'm turning my attention to the Chante Dent, who is in the lab today. Chante, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Michelle. I'm doing lovely. How are you doing?
I am doing amazing. Thank you for taking time to come in today. I am so glad that you were available.
Yes. Hey, thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, Chante, as I shared, I do this each time I have a wonderful, amazing guest coming in. I always turn the microphone to you because I believe that you do the best job of introducing you. So if you don't mind, would you please take a little time to tell the folks who you are, where you're at, what you do, and how you do it? Do you mind?
Yes. All right. I like that. Who am I? Where am I at? What do I do? And how do I do it? I'm Chante Dent, and I'm a lover of life. I always say I'm a woman who's been through some things, but nonetheless, I celebrate who I have become and who I am consistently becoming. I'm currently in Swanee, Georgia, but I have to give a shout out. I'm a Georgia peach now, but I am originally from California, so I have to give credit to my roots. I have the honor of being in a position where I can serve people. I always say that everything I do must stem from the foundation of my core, of who I am. And essentially it gets to manifest in the various components, different aspects. So I serve as a personal and executive coach. Also have the honor of partnering with a few companies where I facilitate workshops and serve as the certified emotional intelligence and psychological safety workshop facilitator. And I do this with a company called Blue EQ. So go ahead and look them up. But I really do just appreciate the opportunity to help individuals live emotionally healthy lives. I am also a mom and a wife. And at the end of the day, again, just a lover of life. And when it's all said and done, all of this credit, the joy, the person who I am, I have to give it to my Lord and Savior, Jesus. I always have to give that shout out. I just enjoy living life with Jesus joy. It gives me the opportunity to bounce back, to stay in alignment, and again, just to do what I do and to serve others and help them live emotionally healthy lives.
No, I love that, Chante. I love it. You know what? That's so important. Jesus' joy is it's not the same kind of joy.
Yeah, say it again.
Right. It's not the same kind of joy. Like that, there's a strength there that everybody don't really get to imbibe. So no, I love that. You know what? We always like to just have a conversation around things that causes us to change, that causes us to have lives. And when you talk about, you share with me your tagline, this heal, this love, this live. How did you get there? Because everybody doesn't get there, right? But so talk a little bit about, if you don't mind. I think it's important sometimes for people to get to a place of healing and get into love and living in a place of joy and other things. There's always a backstory. Before we came on, we were talking about, there you had to get to a healing space from dealing with trauma. So give us a little bit of backstory and kind of bring us up to how you got here.
Yes, indeed, Michelle. The backstory stems really as early as being 5 years old through 5 to 8 years old, as far as I can recall, experiencing childhood sexual violation. That's really where a lot of the turmoil began. And I did not deal with anything at that time. It wasn't even an option. It was, you better not say anything. And so growing up in church, that was a part of my lifestyle. And I always say it was also a part of my saving grace, not knowing as a child how that trauma was messing me up. I still have the benefit of being in church and being surrounded in a home where my parents loved me, my siblings loved me. So that was a huge anchor and a cushion. And then unfortunately, I experienced acquaintance rape in my adulthood, and that led to pregnancy. And it wasn't until then, and this is like I'm in my 20s, it wasn't until then that I realized, shoot, even though I want to act like this never happened and I want to sweep it under the carpet and move on, at this point, I can't go that route. There was the way everything unfolded, it was kind of like an in your face type of situation, because when I was raped, I did not want to talk about it. I wanted to categorize it as I just had sex with somebody, and I unfortunately had fallen into that sin in the past, and I'll just call it that again, and I will do what I have to do. Unfortunately, just again, the way it all transpired, about a month or so later, this is when I discovered or realized I was pregnant from that assault. And that is when everything hit me, like slapped me in the face. It was what I didn't want to deal with that I was now forced to deal with.
Yeah.
It was heavy, Michelle.
I bet.
Heavy. Yeah. And even in the beginning stages, I do feel like I was still trying to deny. But I have different terms that I have coined over the past few years. And one is denial leads to destruction. And I remember there was the day when it was the day after I left the hospital for an exam for them to confirm, etc. And they told me I needed to meet with a therapist. And so they gave me all this contact information. And I scheduled an appointment to go meet with a therapist that next day. But in that waiting room, I sat there, and everything, even though it happened a month ago, it was so new and so fresh and so overwhelming. And I sit in this waiting room and I tell my sister, take me home. I don't want to go in there. Why would I want to talk about what happened all over again? Like, it's bad enough that it happened. Do I really want to talk to someone about it? Absolutely not. And so she did. She like, all right, let's go. I mean, I don't know if I asked her, I probably demanded,
Right. Yeah.
But Michelle, what I'll never forget is that day my mom said, oh, what are you doing? I thought you had an appointment. And I looked at her and I was like, yeah, but I don't want to go. I don't want to talk about it. And my mom said something that I will never forget. She said, Chante, if you don't talk about this, if you don't deal with it, essentially, if you don't heal, it will to you for the rest of your life. And Michelle, she said this with so much conviction, but there was so much power in her words that I reluctantly agreed to reschedule this appointment, to take that step to healing, whatever that was going to look like. And so I did. I went back to that therapist, who eventually encouraged me to work with a rape crisis counselor as well. And I began this process, this journey, really one step at a time, trying to figure out, how am I going to bounce back? How am I going to feel like Chante again?
Yeah.
Do I even matter? Do I still have a purpose? Because right now I feel like I'm a mess. I'm dirty. I'm damaged. There's no more future or all that you ever thought you would be, Chante. You can forget about that. Like that was my truth. And so it was a dark place. It was a painful place. But there's something that's so powerful about having a relationship with Christ, just being open, because it was my turning point. It was one night, like everybody in the house is asleep, and I'm still trying to heal from rape. I'm trying to figure out, what do I do with the child in my womb, and I'm probably still considered a mess. Everybody in my household, they were asleep, and I remember being restless, and I was watching TV, and I saw this show, this Christian show, and it was timely. It was a panel of women sharing about their struggles. And they had a lot of different struggles, from divorce to miscarriages. They had gone through a lot. But at the end of the day, it was women talking about how they were called to the front line. And as I heard their stories, crying uncontrollably, because all I could see is me in my state of brokenness. I thought I was called to the front line, but not anymore, But then these women, their stories gave me hope. And I just realized that night that the God that I learned about growing up, the one I love and serve, I need to know you on a different level. Because right now, I'm a mess, and I really don't think I have anything to give you. And that night, I could hear it in my heart, like, Chante, you don't think you're giving me anything, but really, you're giving me everything. And I cried so hard that night, but I tell you what, that was the night that I saw the light at the end of the tunnel. And that was when I knew the road is probably not going to be easy, right? But I am going to choose to allow Holy Spirit to lead me and to guide me. Because what I don't want to do is live a life where I'm wounded.
No, that's good. That's good. You know what? And it takes having a moment like that to see that, once there's things that happens to other people, that it wasn't something that just happened to you. And your story wasn't exactly like maybe the other women that you saw, but they had stories too. So everybody has a story and things that they've got to deal with. But like you said, there was hope, and you made a choice that, hey, I'm going to live in hope that I'm going to be able to use this and do something different. No, I love that. I absolutely love that. But one other thing that you said as you were sharing that, and I wrote it down here, was like, denial leads to destruction. You've put some language, you've developed some language that you kind of put towards things now, because a lot of times we don't have the language. I can't identify what I'm feeling. I can't readily articulate what is going on. I know that sometimes things happen in families, especially a lot of times in we go to church. We grow up in church, and there are things that happen to us, and it's like, oh God, why did this happening, or why did this particular thing happen, and we begin to normalize sometimes trauma. But I like that you said that your mom said something to you, and you were like, you know what, hey, she said something, and it so convicted you that you said, hey, I'm going to do something different, and you had another conversation. So now some of this work and things that you're doing around helping people to be able to live really emotionally healthy lives, what does that look like? How does that translate now, this experience that you've had, and kind of where you've been able to lived through your own pains and
Mm-hmm.
your own work, and now helping other people. What does that, how did that transfer get started?
After, and I say many years after this
Mhm.
process of going through that healing journey, when I was at the point, I'll say first, I became a certified rape crisis counselor. So that was my
Mhm.
first step into going back, in a sense, crossing back over to the other side to help others. Like, I need you to come over here too. It feels good on this side. Let's go. So that was where it first started, signing up, going through that training to become a certified rape crisis counselor. And that led me to, a few years later, starting a nonprofit organization that specifically helps women heal from sexual trauma. So I created a curriculum, and it was in the beginning stages. I knew this is something I wanted to do. I felt led to do. And I thought I need a name. So we came up with the name. This is again some years ago. It was Earnest Love. And I was talking to my husband, and I'm like, I need a tagline. I need something else. And he's like, heal, love, live. And so that came up, and took a deeper dive, heal emotionally, love earnestly, live freely. So then it becomes this formula in an interesting way. I didn't have that while I was going through my healing, but when I look back, like, oh, wait a minute, that's exactly what it was. It was
Mhm.
that stage of healing emotionally. All of those emotional wounds needed to be restored. And
Yeah.
then the love component was in three parts. For me, it was number one, receiving God's love for me. I have to renew my mind and see myself as He created me. When I could remind myself this is who God created, then I can look at myself in the mirror and say, I love myself. I can love who I am. So I can love
Mhm.
who I am becoming, which allowed me to love other people
Yeah.
and not put barriers up. And that to me led me to living a free life, to live freely. So to heal
Yeah.
emotionally, love earnestly, and live freely. And that those were the beginning stages of wanting individuals to experience healing after trauma, after emotional wounds.
Yeah.
It goes even further. In a
Okay.
lot of the work I do is a reflection of my personal journey, because I'll just say, I did the work, allow the Holy Spirit to lead me, guide me, intentionally working from the emotional wounds of sexual trauma. But then I
Mhm.
realized there was another level of emotional stability that I needed to embrace for every area of my life, every relationship, the personal as well as the professional.
Mhm.
And I'm going to fast forward some years post
Mhm.
COVID, fast forward many years, but post COVID, I connected, and this is when I connected with Blue EQ, and I
Mhm.
understand the concept of emotional intelligence and psychological safety, which I
Yeah.
sometimes I say would just be really emotional intelligence reminds me of the fruit of the spirit, really. But it meant so much to me because I thought about, again, looking at my life and looking at other people, how many of us walk around with a walking wounded? And
Yeah.
those
Mhm.
wounds manifest in our relationships. And I just felt like I've made a lot of mistakes in my life because of emotional wounds. And I knew something was off, especially when you look at it from a spiritual perspective. Okay, God, if
Right.
you're the God who does this, that, and the other, what do I need to do to get into alignment so I can experience that abundant life, that type of freedom, that Jesus joy
Mhm.
that we talk about,
Yes.
how can that be made real? And so I just had to take a deeper dive of being open and saying, I don't know everything. I thank God that I've come this far, but what else do I need to understand to experience
Yeah.
this fullness? And so I believe that is what transpired and allowed me to go into the work that I'm still doing today. And it's a
Mhm.
combination of coaching individuals, of helping them to increase their skills of emotional intelligence. How do
Yeah.
you create a psychological safe space? In other words, how are you treating people? How do people feel when they're in your presence? And again, I always have to look at myself first. What adjustments do I need to make first at home with my spouse, with my children, and then outside of my house, outside
Yeah.
of my how am I relating to other people? And everyone, has their areas. It was emotional stability for me that needed to increase because I knew that it's possible to be emotionally stable without being hard-hearted.
Yeah.
I still want to love people. I still want
Yeah.
to connect with people and enjoy thriving relationships. I don't want to be so sensitive that I'm always wounded by
Right.
what someone says or what someone does. And so that is the foundation of what I do, why I do it, how I do it. And again, I am so privileged and honored to be able to allow this passion of mine to manifest in different components of life, in the professional and personal and corporate. I absolutely am thankful for all of it.
Yeah. No, and that's a blessing. It's a blessing. You know what? A lot of times, people, and I'm sure that you have found this and help others navigate the space, because we like to think that we go into a corporate workspace and we don't take emotions with us. We're supposed to leave our emotions on the outside of the door and show up in our workspace and do all of our work. Now, this is where you spend most of your time.
Yeah.
The people who are there are who you spend a lot of your time with. Now, granted, workspaces have changed. So now you're doing more work in virtual spaces. So you're not necessarily sitting in cubicles or in offices with people as we once did. But the truth is, you still spend a lot of time with these people. You're still depending on other people to do the things that they need to do in order for you to do the things that you need to do. And sometimes it gets challenging. Like, that's why we have the DISC model assessments and your strengths finders and your Myers-Briggs and all those types of things. And let's be honest, a lot of times our emotions are very much involved in who we are, and being able to get a good read on how to manage them. So what do you I always like to ask anyone who comes into the lab, how do you best navigate, right? What are pieces of advice? And of course, I want everyone who is listening in, I want you to make sure that you go to chantedent.com, because if you may need some work in the or maybe you want to bring some emotional intelligence facilitation to your organization, certainly look her up, because this is a highly trained facilitator who can come in and work with you and your teams in managing this. But Chante, what are some of the things that you recommend to individuals as well as teams, to leaders across organizations? Because this is still one of those things that's important for people, and people have a tough time navigating in their workplaces and in other areas. But I know workplaces is one that's challenging.
You're right, Michelle. It's so important. It's crucial. We often allude to years ago, professional environments were more like command and control. Not so much this day and age. People will leave you.
They will. That's very true.
Yeah, but it's so similar to where you started alluding to the Myers-Briggs and DISC a lot, like from a professional perspective, like with Blue EQ, we always start with an assessment. And it's a powerful tool because you see the results of your assessment, and it gives you a clear idea, a much better idea, I'll say, of where you are today. And what I love about these types of assessments, especially when you consider emotional intelligence, it's not necessarily like a stamp, like this is where you are today, and this is how you're always going to be. Like, we encourage individuals to use it as a tool of self-discovery. So along that line, you can use the assessment. I always like to encourage people to have conversations. I love talking to people. So I grew up in a home where my dad, he would always tell my sister and brother and I, like, never be above growth. Always be open to growth. Always own what you did and make adjustments. And so that has been a part of my nature, where I know I dropped the ball. I do. And when it's brought to my attention, I do try to make the first question, or along the beginning of a conversation, tell me what I did wrong. I don't want to continue doing it. And I want to make adjustments. I'm trying to become a better person, a wiser person. And so even in the midst of discomfort, I would encourage you, listener, to have those conversations. And we already know sometimes it pokes at us because it doesn't feel good. Yeah, it's the truth. It doesn't always feel good when someone points out our flaws or our areas of growth. But I'm telling you, it's extremely beneficial because you can mature in so many areas. That temporary moment or that temporary discomfort is worth a lifetime of freedom and growth. And so, depending on where you're trying to grow and who you're trying to do this with, if it's your personal or your professional environment, you can start by having a conversation. If it's in a relationship, what's working? What isn't working? What can we do differently? How can we enhance our relationship? And here's what I must add to it. If you are on the giving end, be respectful. Don't be rude. Don't degrade. Don't tear down. Be honest and candid, but show respect when you're telling someone the truth about themselves. And when you are on the receiving end, you might not 100% agree with everything that you're hearing. It's also important that you stay in open. Just listen. And whatever you hear, ask yourself a question, but you must commit to honestly answering the question.
Yeah.
Is what they're saying true? Is it valid? In what areas do I know I need to make some adjustments in? How can those adjustments enhance my life, enhance my relationship with myself? How can those adjustments enhance my relationship with other people? And Michelle, we mentioned this earlier. Like, I don't know about anybody else, but I feel like I strongly believe, and the older I get, the more I really believe this. As long as I am alive, why not stay open to growing and becoming and transforming?
Right.
It makes life so much more enjoyable.
It does. It does. Life is much richer that way. It really is. It really is. It really is. It really, really is.
Yeah.
When I think about, especially now, we're living in a time where people can say what they want to, they can do what they want to. And like you said, we're not so much in society where it's command and control, even though people like to think that it is, right? Like I'm in command and control of my Instagram and my Facebook page and what I want to say and do. And like I appreciate the feedback you just shared, where if you're on the receiving end or if you're on the giving end, ways that you can do that. What do you recommend for people when I'm thinking about how life is now? Like, you can just kind of go out there. I see a lot of people very often expressing themselves. I always think about, we call them Facebook friends, right? But the truth is, like, it's an open forum, it's very public, and you can go out and you can say really whatever you want to, because you do command and control your social medias. But I think, or I like to think, that everything isn't necessarily, it's not as prudent, or I think you should be a little more prudent with your social media and some of the things that you share. But I think sometimes that people get a lot, when I'm in an emotional place, that may not be the best place for me to share everything that I may be feeling.
Right. Yeah.
What do you have any thoughts or recommendations for people from an emotional intelligence perspective as it relates to their social media platform?
Yeah, I joke around sometimes, depending on who I'm talking to. Before you do anything, ask yourself, what would an emotionally intelligent individual do? So ask yourself that question. But it's important to use wisdom before typing and posting. I am an avid journaler, and I have found that journaling first, even before I pick up a phone, I'm not even thinking social media, even before we pick up a phone just to say whatever we want to say, perhaps you can just go old school and pick up a pen and a piece of paper and get it out that way, or type it on your laptop. But I do feel that for some, depending on where they are in that space of emotional maturity or emotional stability, And I have to acknowledge it's not easy for everyone to process their emotions. Everybody has different backgrounds, different upbringings, multiple contributing factors to why they do what they do. And some people are not ready to do the work. And so for those beginning stages, I would encourage someone, because it is important to get it out of here. Otherwise, you're kind of mentally tormenting yourself. Get it out of your mind, release it in a healthy manner, write it down. There are times where you can write it down and it seals the deal. You don't even revisit it anymore because it was that simple act of processing through writing, and that was enough for you to get through it and you can release it. Other times, writing it out, that just really is that first step of you having a moment. And you're right, Michelle, a lot of times people turn to social media for a number of reasons and probably not healthy or wise. So hopefully they have a confidant, a mentor, a coach, a therapist, someone in their church that they can trust, someone who is interested in their growth, and they can share with that person, but allow social media to, in a sense, be that last step. You don't have to post it. Don't. What good could come out of it? And if, in fact, you think the good is because you are putting someone on blast, or I'm going to tell them, I'm going to put them in their place, yeah, just rethink it. There's so much more to say, but I'd say those could be helpful first steps.
I know. I always wonder if, like, the person that you really wanted to say all that to, if they even read the post.
If they even read it, probably not.
I know. I'm like, I wonder if the intended target got this, but you know, you never know. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I feel there's also a beautiful, refreshing, and empowering level of maturity when you feel like sending that email or posting and you type it, and then you hear that still small voice saying, don't press send, don't press enter. Do you listen to that voice? I'm a firm believer that a lot of the answers to our questions, they're in us. We just need to listen.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
We know what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing.
That is for sure.
You know, that is to go in the opposite direction. If you're used to going off on people, next time go in the opposite direction and don't say anything. If you're accustomed to suppressing and being that silent, being that people pleaser, then go in the opposite direction and begin sharing your heart. Try that.
And see how that works. Yeah, that's a good one. That is so good. That is so good. No, this is great. No, I think this is super helpful. I always like to also, because I swear it seems like our time always seems to go so quickly. It just moves too fast. What now you do, because I want to make sure that I am sharing the things that you do. You are a personal and executive coach, safe, emotional
intelligence and psychological safety workshop facilitator.
Yes, thank you for saying that, because I've got safety workshop facilitator, and I was like, I know that I'm missing a word here. So thank you for restating that for me. That's perfect. So in that line of work, how do people know when they are a good candidate or when they may be, because sometimes you may not realize when it is time for me to get some necessary assistance with where I'm at, with what I'm doing, with it may be time for me to level up. When do you find, or when should people maybe start looking at and saying, hey, you know what? I probably really ought to start thinking about seeing Chante. When do you find that people are ready for you?
You know, I feel as if, I know when individuals get to the point where they are uncomfortable with where they are, like, I just can't stay in this space anymore. That's usually when they take a step. As long as you're in denial and you are normalizing your dysfunction, it's always going to be somebody else. It was them, it was him, it was her. I'm good. It's never you. That person probably isn't ready. You know, if interesting enough, when I think about some of our workshops, you get some participants who are sent there, right? They didn't sign up voluntarily. They were told because perhaps they don't have that level of self-awareness yet, where they say, I think I need to engage in this content so I can grow in these particular areas. But I do believe that when you press pause and you are intentional about experiencing emotional freedom, and you can take a look at your relationships and you say, no, something is off, then you're right. Yeah, something is off. Pay attention to that. People say, pay attention to the red flags. I say, nah, don't wait till it's red. Pay attention to the yellow flag.
Yeah.
Right? If it's green, you go. If it's yellow, caution. Revisit what's really going on. And so I'm a firm believer that, again, internally, you know when it's time, because some people will say you're sick and tired of your current situation, and there's a longing for freedom. There's something more, and oftentimes we don't know how to get there. I want to be free, but I'm not sure. I see that free version of me, but how do I reach her?
Yeah.
And so, yes, with coaching, and I say healthy coaches will have a consultation, and they'll help determine, is coaching for you? For some coaches, we need to be honest and say it's probably more helpful and beneficial for you to see a therapist. And you can see a therapist and a coach simultaneously. For some, perhaps there's a lot of deeply rooted situations, experiences going on. My line of work, specifically, if I'm working with a female who's experienced sexual trauma, I can pull from my experience as a certified rape crisis counselor and integrate that. But for the most part, yes, if you know you're not settled with where you are, and this is this internal unsettling, it could be Chante or someone else. I encourage you to take that step. Now is the time. Don't cheat yourself and don't cheat your relationship. You deserve to live this abundant life where you are experiencing this joy and this peace that no one can take away. And there is a way that you can live that type of life. Sometimes we need some assistance getting there.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it, Chante. I love it, Chante. If that's you, if it sounds like you're ready to experience a new level, a new place of freedom, reach out to Chante. ChanteDent.com. Check her out. Chante, before we get out of here, because the time just has blown by, your 3 pieces of advice for change makers, or just give us one, your biggest piece of advice for change makers.
My biggest advice would be to never feel as if you're always wrong if you are the one going against the grain. Because oftentimes we feel like if we're not running the same race and going the same course at the same pace with everybody else, it must be me. But I've come to realize that there are times where you are the only one, and you feel this strain because you're going against the grain. That's not always a sign that you're going in the wrong direction. In fact, you could be headed toward your place and your path of victory. And so stay the course, even when it's uncomfortable. Stay the course and stay intimate with your relationship with Christ.
Amen. All right. I love it. Chante, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your time today. Thank you all. Yes. Thank you all for tuning in. As always, this has been the MG with the Reimagine Your Life Podcast. Tune in every Friday for a new episode. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, so that you get the notifications when a new podcast comes up. And as always, thank you guys so much for tuning in and joining us. And I look forward to seeing you back here next week. Thank you. Bye, Chante.
Have a good one. Thank you. Bye.